Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us at Venture Cafe for another virtual artist talk. My name is Angela McQuillan, and I'm the curator at the Esther Klein Gallery at the Science Center, which is also home to Venture Cafe. So tonight, I'm really excited to present the work of Philadelphia-based artist Amy Orr. Amy is a multimedia installation and fiber artist whose work often involves the reinvention of manufactured or discarded materials and mostly plastic. So the first time I encountered Amy's work a few years ago, I was walking down Market Street and I saw one of her street installations on a signpost. And I thought it was one of the greatest things that I've ever seen. So I took a picture of it and promptly posted it on Instagram. And then later on, I got to meet Amy. So I'm really excited and honored to have her live here today with us to tell us more about her work. Amy's been creating art for a long time. She was previously a tenured professor, an administrator, a designer, and an art publication editor. And now she's primarily a street and studio artist. So with that, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Amy Orr.
Great, thanks everybody. So it's how fun it is to be here with many faces I recognize, though I'm not going to play around and look at you right now. But I'm really happy to have you in my studio, to have anyone in my studio, really. It's just so much fun. It hasn't happened in a while. What's up on the screen right now is just where I'm sitting and talking to you. And I thought to start, I would just read a little bit. You know, I've written about my own work and I've had people write about me for years. And so instead of mumbling, I'm just going to start by reading a little bit and then I warm up and I'll go through my work with you and what I've been doing for the last few years. So my background is really in textiles, and you can probably, I like people to know that and to know that you can make reference to my work looking at a quilt. I work with my background in textiles. My work can be understood as reference to the crazy quilt, in which fabrics, in which scraps of all kinds are pieced together to create something of unexpected beauty that raises questions about art, craft, and creative intent. I've been collecting artifacts off the streets in the area that I live really since the 1970s. And you'll see as I move back in time telling my story that the materials I have chosen over the years tell stories about humankind, and and now I realize as I look at it, they really tell stories about the post-manufacturing era in the United States. And when materials really began to come in mass from China, these were the kinds of things that really made my eyes spark, these multiples that were falling on the floor and were, you know, available in little packages by the hundreds. I suddenly, you know, I really very early saw these things as my art materials. These, you know, my little bits of what I would use to build my nest if I was a magpie. I'm drawn to materials for their color, abundance, and original intent. Whether constructing a patterned composition or figurative mosaic, the found fragments become a sparkling wasteland of personal story, personal histories, and common stories. I've been collecting, as I said, these materials for a very long time. I often work in going through this collection and this experimentation in materials. I often work in the quilt format, and I'm going to show you what's on my wall here. And actually, I think I'm going to begin ad-libbing and going through my slides now that I've warmed up. Here's some more shots of my studio now. I live in a very big house in West Philadelphia, which has been in the news a lot now. And the very area that is being talked about in the news, West Philadelphia and near 52nd Street and Malcolm X Park, is the neighborhood where I've been living and scavenging the sidewalks since I've been living there since the 60s and scavenging since like the 70s. I've been at it a long time. As a little girl, I remember my mother concerned that I was depressed because I would walk down the sidewalk looking down. And I was very happy, really. I am very happy. But first of all, I'm a little clumsy. And also what I would see on the ground and the materials I would pick up, whether it was some little, a twig, but more often it was a bottle cap or a piece of wire. I was really scavenging the ground for that, and also mapping the sidewalk with the cracks, that were forming over time. So these have been my inspirations for a long time. And here we are now, and I'm collecting, um, oh, right there. Oh, just one more thing that's in my studio. I'll just go in order here. One more element of my studio just to show you around. I work a lot with credit cards, and for the last, 15 years, I have been collecting cards. It's very easy to collect credit cards. Once people start giving them to you, or you make it known that you're collecting something, I over the years, I've really been able to get a lot. So this is a card file from Swarthmore College, a vintage card file that is now full of credit cards that are separated by color. Since I have so much stuff in my studio, what I do, I separate it by color. I can't really understand, and I can always remember colors. So if I'm looking for something, and I do look for little things, I can find it. If I can, because I can remember colors. This piece on the right, just jumping right into some artwork here, is standing in my studio right now. And it's from like 2009, I think. And I've been looking at the relationship with China for a while. I knew things were really, they were just not balanced here. And this, as I spoke, as I'm looking at materials, and I'm collecting plastics. These plastics are all coming from China. Everything I'm using is coming from China. And this transference of money, and the transference of money that's not even cash, it's all plastic. So we're dealing with these layers of materials that we're not going to be able to get rid of, and that it's my job to crush into something that is beautiful and makes you think about what the composition that I'm laying out. Even when I work very simply in doing like yardage and surfaces, this is the wall that I'm looking at right now. And as I said, and you're going to see in a minute, this is a really good view of how I prepare materials. And right around me here, there's a whole collection of things. And this is what I'm doing when I Zoom these days. So, someone might be knitting, and I'm wiring flosser picks. That's what those things are called. They're flosser picks. And I always include some found ones in my work, but in truth, I am using pre-consumer materials from CVS at the moment. They have a really nice green color that caught my interest, particularly when I was seeing them in relationship, this plague that was all over the sidewalk, and seeing them in relationship to that, I forgot the word again, but that bug that's been around all summer, the beautiful one with the, what's it called again?
Lanternfly.
The lanternfly. Thank you, Robin. Let's keep going. So we'll be looking at these things one at a time, and I'll tell you about them. So in the spring, when everybody was, everybody suddenly was hit with this, suddenly we couldn't go out, and I was home on my own, and all sorts of things happened. It was a very amazing time. I really appreciated very much where I was living. Here I am in the middle of the city, and I have space inside and outside, and I've got this great view of the streets on 3 and 4 directions. And I really came to really enjoy where I was, and not, which was sort of interesting for me right at this point in my life. I came to the conclusion I should stay. I also was kind of sick, and I had a mysterious ailment. We still don't know quite what it was, but I spent a few months with a terrible headache. And the only thing I could think was, could I live without any artistic drive or creative intent? Would that be okay? Because I had no feeling or emotion whatsoever. And I was just kind of testing what the future could be like if I wasn't making, would I want to live? Well, so in fact, the answer is yes. I was not going to commit suicide. So I thought that was a good place to be. But in fact, my drive did come back, and this is the first piece I made. The shape of it is in relationship to the street poles that we're going to see, and they're 12 inches wide vertically, so that they can wrap really tightly around a signpost. That's what I use because they belong to the city, and the city welcomes art. And you can see the structure here of what becomes my street art. I always make quilts. I'm not really jumping around, but a little bit. So whatever material I've been exploring in my life, and as I go through, as I've started and moved through, I've seen myself as collecting a palette of materials that would serve me in my art making, that had a certain significance to me. It's not everything that I can work with, it really has to speak to me with and answer a number of things. In some ways, it really has to be a beautiful, little object or object. I work with little objects. And these plastic pieces are, to me, are just beautiful. And the overall structure that they form, I am working with. It's something that I'm working with, and I'm not thin, plastic was, some years ago, 15 years ago, plastic was one of my materials. And now I realize in putting this presentation together, and I've realized it recently, that it's just really overtaken my life. It is not that pleasant to work with plastic, and I long for natural materials, in fact, but I'm on a journey, and it seems like it's relevant at the time. So I'm still playing with all of these ideas that it evokes. So anyway, this is a beach blanket. It's very much in the structure of a quilt, and you can see that here. You can see the back layer of this PV and the front layer. That's why you're seeing like a double here of PVC coated chicken wire. So it's wire coated with plastic so that it really can't ever deteriorate. So just like, just these horrific materials. And this is just a fun piece. It's a rocker, and it looks very much like the quilt. I did it within the same, well, I'm always working on it now, actually. Did this a couple of years ago, and I did it for the airport, and it was a very simple assignment. They gave me a Leah Douglas at the airport. I'm very lucky to be an artist that she reaches out to periodically, and she gave me a rocker. I'm a textile artist. I know how to crochet. I do crochet. I do all kinds of stuff. I like soft fabric, and I do believe the original assignment was to do something people could sit in. And it was going to be in the airport in a certain area. Well, look at what I made. I mean, it's not only you wouldn't want to sit in it, but it would actually draw blood because there are so many little pieces of things in there. So fortunate for me, they gave me the chair back, and I'm so grateful it's sitting in my studio now. I really love the materiality of it. That's my textile fiber word. Everything I do is sewn. So every piece of plastic you see, whether it's on this or whether it's on a street installation or whether it's flosser picks in the park, everything has a hole in it and it's stitched together. Behind me, you can see my my favorite tool, which is my drill press, and I have to put a hole in everything. So yeah, that's how I work. I don't work to finish things. I'm a slow artist. When I have a project, of course I want to finish things and do them quickly. But as an artist, just building a continuing, a continuing body of work, I work as slow as I want, and I make things as intricate as I want. And that's the absurdity of what I'm putting out on the street too. It's a tremendous amount of labor with very questionable materials. Well, that's what my work is about. This is in the artist, in a photography studio, 3 drops of water. They're about 3 to 4 feet each, or 1 to 3 feet each. And I made them for Gravers Lane Gallery as an outside installation of lights. And I'm talking about the environment here and what's going on with our water. And the water is completely polluted. My house, just everywhere is covered with these microplastics, and I'm very aware of them. I'm very aware that they're part of my practice too, and that really this stuff is everywhere. And isn't it beautiful? Look at those colors. So 3 drops of water, and they evolved last year, these sort of these very sad drops to me, and they evolved out of another installation I did for the airport, which was made up of these paisleys that represented islands of plastic out in the ocean. So remember, I'm going backwards with my slide presentation, and those drops evolved out of these. And I don't know why I thought I should do that, but it seemed like a very good idea to me at the time, so that I could talk about what I'm doing now and then move back into, where it came from. So these were plastic islands, and they developed into the drops. That seemed to be a more sensuous shape that I'm working with now, and I'm continuing to work with. Also, I'm figuring out how these materials and this work, which I also, exactly the same kind of thing, put out into the street with no value, how one then presents it in exhibitions with value. And so here I am at a crossroads. So there are things that I am still certainly putting out, and I have a whole collection of things on my table right now that will go out into West Philadelphia, just small installations that will go around out in the streets. I'll show you. Here we are. So this is what this is what Angela was referring to, and this is where my intricate needlework came from, from 1970s to 2014, and I started putting little woven structures onto the street, leaving little love letters, marking the landscape. You'll see in the bottom here that I actually kept changing what I call them, because they answer different purposes for me, and they have different intents depending on where they are. And I think also in terms of their art historical content, there are all kinds of words that are being used to refer to street art. So I've sort of played with that a little bit in my titles below. This is the first one I ever did. This park is a couple blocks from my house, and this is Malcolm X Park. I'm referring to it for a couple of reasons. It's been very much in the news in terms of the unrest in Philadelphia, and from a national perspective. So here's Black Oak Park. I put up this installation in 2014. Nobody has ever touched it. I put it up here because when we moved to Philadelphia from Savannah in 1959, my mother dropped us off at this park to play. She was a New Yorker, and you just dropped kids off at the park when she was growing up. And we were actually coming from Savannah at that point. So this was, and I say this, I say this as a person who lives here and has continued to live here. So it's not a bad story, but this was the site of my first mugging at the age of 5. This is Malcolm X Park. So Black Oak Park became Malcolm X Park. And this is the other side of Malcolm X Park, the entrance, the main entrance on 52nd Street in Philadelphia. And I put a new installation up just a few months ago to add my markings to the, to these monuments. Here are a couple. Here's one at City Hall. And I do, you know, just as you look at this and you think, I mean, my handwork, you know, I'm playing on the idea of craft. I'm really pushing what fine craft is. And I consider my work fine craft and fine materials. And it just takes hours to make. So when you look at this and you go, man, she must have like worked on that for like 2 weeks solid. That is true. I did. And this one, I got a phone call a couple of years ago, and someone I didn't know, she called me. She got my number. I don't know how. I guess it's easy. And she was at City Hall, and she was going around the city looking at my work. I don't know how one does that really, but sometimes they just pop up. And they had just taken the sign down, and they were putting up new street signs. So I went down with my car, and this piece is now aging in my backyard. That last one is a significant location, and it's outside my eye doctor's office, and it's right where my father worked at the University of Pennsylvania. So, you know, I have my own little story. I have my own biographical stories that go with the locations, places that are significant to me, my friends' homes, institutions that I want to be in. I just take artistic license and I place my work there. So I showed you Black Oak Park first. This is several blocks away, same neighborhood. This is the gentrified park. So in this gentrified park, I put up my work. It was full of collections from a lifetime. I had dog tags in this one that I had picked up in the park over 20 years. And I put it on the signpost, and within 2 days, it had been stolen. Black Oak Park, no one touched it. Malcolm X Park. Also, I learned not only to use street poles that are in concrete, and it should not be broken concrete, because you could get poles that are in the ground out of the ground just by like stirring them around. A few more, the rail park, green rail park. And also a friend of mine worked very hard to get the rail park built. And so I wanted to put a little monument to her there. City Hall. Broad and Locust, again, this is Avenue of the Arts. I thought I should have a few, and I've actually put installations all the way down Avenue of the Arts. Some have from Temple to Broad and Carpenter. Some have lasted, some have not. This one is now in its second reiteration. It has people who watch over it. And there was an article written about it in the local like Broad Street Review. So yeah, I've taught along here. I've had rendezvous here. I've graduated at the at the Academy of Music. So this was a corner that I decided to claim for my own. And this is all the way down the other end. This is Broad and Carpenter at the High School of the Performing Arts. And this one was a gift to the streets, so as a few of them are. So I throw them out there. It's wonderful to watch people look at them. I have one in front of my house, and when I do go by and check things out, I see people interacting with them or stopping to think. And that's all. Just stop and think. Just stop a minute. Something on the street is a little bit different, and why it's there, and just raises questions that in turn raise other questions, and your mind starts working in some creative way. So this is 4th Street, which was the fabric district in Philadelphia, with all these beautiful buttons. And these have all aged. Some have aged very beautifully. The metal ages first, and the plastic begins to disintegrate. So I do have these places for scientific discovery to see how the materials are holding up over time. The 4th Street pole is special to me. In fact, they renovated the whole, oops, I don't want you to see that yet. They renovated the whole streetscape, and they pulled up my pole, and now it is just standing in the middle of the sidewalk. You can really walk right into the middle of, right? You can really smack your face in it. And I'm sure people do, because it's there like a totem pole. It doesn't even have a sign on it. But the neighbors on that strip wanted to keep it. Love Park, that is a beauty. And of course, it's no longer there. I hope that because Love Park has been completely renovated, by the time it came down, it was a different beautiful object. Um, and I'd like to think that they are in a storeroom somewhere in the streets department, because there are a few of them they might have. So I just installed my work at the Barnes Foundation, much like I do everywhere else. This was at the beginning, 20, towards the beginning, and I was still a little hesitant about what my power was in terms of street art and what I was allowed to do. And it was night, so I was doing it at night. Now I just do anything I want, wherever I want during the day, because I've learned. But it was night, it was dark, and there was a van parked, and I was scared, of course. And there was a van, because there was a van that was just shining their lights on me the whole time. So I couldn't abandon my project in the middle. I had to get this thing on. And I must not have put it on very well, because first of all, what happened was the van slid up next to me when I was getting to the end, and it was a police car. And at that point, I wasn't quite sure that what I could do or what was legal, whatever legal means. I also realized, and this dates back to, what's going on currently in politics. I also realized in doing this, what I can get away with as an old white woman. And I'm very much aware of it. And it really has struck me, and I get it. And I'm using it, I'm figuring it out. But I know that until now, I mean, now no one looks at me because I'm old, and that's also wonderful, because I can get away with a lot. This is the library. This pole was actually commissioned by the Free Library of Philadelphia. And so that there I wasn't putting it up in the dead of night. It was right next to the barns. They saw the barns pole one day and they wanted their own. And so I made this for them, with lots of things, put it down a little bit lower, so kids could touch it and they could see into it. Got lots of good things in it to look at. And I got a phone call that it had been torched. This was over a few years. I got a phone call that had been torched. And of course, I got very paranoid and I thought, who knows who's after me, and personal vendetta. But really, I do think what happened was someone lit they're standing at the pole, bus stop right there. They lit a thing just playing around and went like this. And the whole thing must have just gone up in flames. Just this toxic, and here's another example of what disgusting toxic materials these plastics are. But how beautiful, and look what's left. And I have it because they called me and I was able to take it down again. I was able to take it. So anyway, I just have to finish my barn story. Within 2 days, they took this down. And a while later, I heard from somebody else, because I was standing there looking like up in the air when I was looking for it. And somebody, I can't remember, someone walked over to me and she said, I saw the conservators taking it down. So it must have been someone related to the scene. And in fact, I found out sometime later that it had been taken down by the Barnes, and it was in the director's office. I love that part of it. And when I inquired about it through a friend who was on the board at the time, it came back to me, and you're seeing it behind me, because they were going to have to buy it if they wanted it inside. And so there it is. And I don't think they wanted it at that point, but who knows? I wasn't able to find that out. Just a couple more. This is, again, Magic Gardens. It seemed like an ideal place for my work to be. And they agreed, but I did put it up at night and they saw me. So nothing's really secret these days. I think this is maybe the last one. This is the Perlman. I'm in the Art Museum here. This is the Perlman building at the Art Museum. And I put this up in about 2017 and people have added to it. So that, that is something else that happens. Each pole really becomes its own story and becomes its own identity, and all sorts of things happen. And every pole, for every pole I put up, something really grows out of that, whether it comes down or not. Most of them are still up, and it's all part of the the same experience of doing this kind of work. But people added to the poll, and this is what it looks like now. And it's got stickers up and down, and it's got people have added that people have added to all of these little holes. They've added buttons, and now there are no more buttons. And this is still standing, so that's still standing at the art museum. That's it today. So I like that. I like the story behind that one. This was a trip I took, a train trip I took, and you know what do artists do on a train trip? I made this ribbon that I could then leave little bits of myself, little bits of my story, or add to the stories of places around the country. My sister and I, before the last election, my sister lives in Britain, was very curious about what the hell is going on in the United States. And she proposed a train trip around the country to find out. And what a wonderful experience. And so everywhere I went, including Jerusalem, which was not in the United States, and other places around Europe. So I've been leaving these little pieces with little bits of identity around the country. The House of Cards, I work with plastic, and I got into working with credit cards when my own parents, I'm gonna look at my, okay, good with time. I think I really started working with credit cards when my parents died. And with each person passing away, there was a stack of cards. You know how because people collect cards and you don't know what to do with your ID cards and you can't figure out what to do with them. So everyone who dies leaves a stack of plastic, and people collect it also, which is where I get my plastic. And at a certain point, working with credit cards, I'll be showing you some more works, but I just thought, you know, I had to just go and make a complete house, a whole world of cards, a whole plastic world. And this is my fantasy house of cards. It's only been on exhibit once in 2012. And I find that my work has kept up its immediacy. It still seems kind of current. It's going to be on exhibit again this spring in 2021. Just flipping those numbers. Oh, isn't that good luck? And it does light up, and each room tells a story, you know, not necessarily about me, but just about life and money and plastic and the transactions. And I created these different rooms that all have very fun concepts. At a certain point, when I first just started collecting cards, and it's a problem, I cannot do this anymore, but I would go to a very small, a new recycling center, because there weren't these massive recycling centers yet. And I would be able to get, they had separated everything down to the plastic cards. And that's all I was collecting then. And I would walk away with buckets of cards that I still have, cat litter buckets full of cards that I sorted out and cleaned. It was really remarkable. Problem now is that things are not being broken down to that extent. Now that recycling has become the norm, there are not these funny little places that are separating things like this. And it's a very big problem. You know, so my work, you know, it keeps re-engaging me when I look at it, which I got to do in preparation for this. And the world of cards, map of the world. You know, what is it really all about? Like sitting here right now, it's all about business deals and this exchange of money and power. So that's it. And China, revisit, you know, China's been one of my themes. It's not really 2017, it's more like 2009. But this is a handkerchief. It's really, this is only like 16 by 16 inches or smaller. And I cut up all the cards into 1/2 inch fragments. And then I drill a hole in them. If I'm smart, I drill holes first in a pattern and then cut them in between. Every time I do things in my work, I'm working with the materials in a new way. So I'm always reinventing what I do. I'm almost never doing the same thing twice, which is not a good idea in art practice. You could just build up so much more expertise if you keep at it. But anyway, these are beaded plastic fragments. The little dots are those little glass beads, little seed beads. This is China, which is again this and China within the rest of that whole landmass, and Russia comes in right here, and this is the water. I've learned a lot of geography doing these maps. These are commissions. So what does one do what does one do in the world to make money, or does anyone else want the work? So yes, actually, people do want the work, but there is always a question about the value of the work because the materials are so common. The workmanship is not, but it's an interesting juxtaposition. So this was a commission from RBC Bank in Canada and a family portrait. And from the same family, a commission of Bob's brain. It was for a brain surgeon. Love that. And I made it in all of these, the person's cards are included. There are stories with all of this because I'm always dealing with personal artifacts, and I'm always dealing with identities and hiding identities. So that is, oh, and back to the last election, Obama Hope, appropriated from Shepard Fairey, and who he appropriated the image as well. So we all took it from there. And this, of course, this is Mao, instead of Mao Sees Red by Andy Warhol, this is Mao Sees Green, money. And even back in 2009, that the politics with China from 2009 till now, with commerce and plastic, has changed so much. I'm beginning to understand what a lifetime is, and being able to see things over a period of time and the difference that makes. Credit card shower. This is an outdoor shower stall that is shingled in credit cards. 2014, and it is holding up very well. The only problem is a lot of the plastic cards, every version of plastic card is made up in a different way, of different poisons, sealed together. And a lot of them have a very fine layer of like cellophane on the top of them. And over time, you can't see it. Excuse me. And over time, not very much time, it deteriorates. The cards themselves just get washed out, and they they look like a New England, they look like New England shingles. They're very washed out. This is a close-up of the cards, and this is a few years later, and I was making materials, perhaps for the chair. I make this yardage of things that I then work together. And so this is inside of this shower. It's a bit, a waterfall, a flow of water from the shower head. Now we're just jumping into quilts here. And as I said, the quilts really show the evolution of my art and the evolution of materials and how I relate to materials, how I use them. This is this is the first credit card quilt I made. It's made of, as I said, 1/4-inch squares with a hole in them. And then around it, there are shards of little slivers of plastic. They're completely stitched down onto velvet and satin. This is a little more recent, a square, and I call quilts everything that goes on the wall. And that's just, for lack of a better word for what my art is, I'm just using it here as, in my presentation. This is, I think, so 36-inch square, but it is layers of fabric. It's a front layer, a middle layer, and a back layer. It's just always becomes my structure for keeping things together. And I'm using this flower format for a lot of things, including a small jewelry line. It's not really a jewelry line, but I have made I have used this this format a lot for doing body ornament, as well as surfaces, as well as art objects. This post-consumer tartan, it's woven plastic cards and translucent American Express cards. So I'm using again a quilt pattern, so that it becomes a tartan, that becomes something very recognizable and engaging. And this piece is in Parktown Place. Parktown Place has liked my work a lot. I think it suits their natures, I'm happy to say. So this one is installed permanently there. Tumbling blocks. Yeah, I'm calling it a quilt. It's plastic on wood, but it does represent, so much of its history. This could just as well be a church floor as a tumbling block quilt in Rome. So my inspirations, my inspirations come from everywhere, really. They come from everywhere, patterns and textures and little found objects. This is a quilt. It's not quite big enough. It's not comfortable. And it was a homage to affordable health care. I was really happy as a self-employed artist. And what year was this? So this was 4 years ago or 6 years ago. I'm sorry, oh, it does say 2014. Yeah. And so this is a tumbling block pattern. It's completely stitched together. It's completely held together with holes drilled and waxed thread. And my son's baby quilt, made sometime after, oops, I have to quick clicking. I can just do this. Made sometime after he was born, probably with little remnants that he and other children on the block were picking up from the sidewalks and bringing me. Luckily, we lived in a neighborhood where there were a lot of crack vials, and I loved crack vials because they look like little perfume vials, and they're all different colors, and they're just like so sweet. And of course I say that, tongue in cheek, but I was looking at materials in it, and I was looking at materials and documenting humankind at the same time without really realizing what I was doing then. I realize now what I was doing, and I do it much more purposefully, but really documenting the state of affairs and the state of materials. These are Publishers Clearinghouse stamps, which I just loved. They used to come in the mail, and you could stick them all over the place. You could stick them all over the place. This is $100 quilt, and I once went on a ski trip, and I didn't have anything to do. So I figured I would find something to do, and I couldn't find anything to do. So I decided, instead of buying materials, I thought I'd just buy something in the store and I could find things, and then I would do a little project. Instead, I really couldn't. There was just nothing there. So I started working with dollar bills at that time. And so instead of buying supplies, I would just tear up money. And so this is $100 quilt. And some years ago, and it's made of 100 $1 bills. Again, pieced in a square quilting pattern. Along the edges, a few years ago, I realized that, of course, it was no longer worth $100. So I found out what the inflation rate is, and I added that number of dimes around the edges, so it'd still be worth $100, or still have $100 in currency in it.
Amy, we have a question.
Yes.
Do you ever work with natural found materials?
I so desperately want to work with natural found materials right now. Yes, I do work with found materials. I do a lot of different things, and particularly when I was teaching, I just had a lot more opportunities to get my hands into stuff. And I work with paper, and I work with felt. I make things, but I don't necessarily use it in my art practice right now. I'm also a macrame virtuoso. And that's just funny to people my age that macrame is really popular now, but I could take anybody on at knot tying, but with natural materials. I'm really drawn to natural materials, and I actually am looking for the place where I start sneaking them back in. And this summer, well, wait a minute, I'm going to be showing you some natural materials in a moment. This summer, so I have worked a lot with twist ties. My mother died, her kitchen was full of, drawer was full of twist ties. We do not have as many now, but your mothers all probably had jars of twist ties as well. Now they're coveted because you need little things to close bags with and, bread with and stuff. But anyway, not only but I collected a lot of the twist ties that I worked with, or most of them. These are my mother's. And then the ones that are all white might have been a box of twist ties I added to, pre-consumer waste. These black ones, again, following a quilt pattern, the way I got those colors, I know that I have a lot of quilters listening to me too. So I'm giving them what they want. But all of these are tiny little strips, and I'll show them to you sometime closer up. If I start trying to do that, I'll get really messed up. The edges of them are all hand colored because it's all about the process. It's all about the making. And particularly when I was teaching full time, I couldn't really finish anything. It was so hard to keep up an art practice. So I just I just kept going. And it could be that I remember this was specifically kind of what was going on in those years, the early aughts, when I would so like every day I could just make a square, and that would be my sketchbook and my meditation, and build up a surface. This is playing around with ideas about, American flag and identity. And this one again is twist ties in a pattern. Bones. So I work with bones. They're natural. They're also remnants, remnants of dinner, just like, the twist ties are remnants of this, or, they're falling out of, what you've been using in the kitchen. So also these are the remnants of dinner. And this one, is what it was. It was made as a sampler. It might be a little big for a sampler, but it's the size of it's 36 by 45. And those are all chicken bones from family dinners. Some of them are plastic. I always have a little plastic in it. So some of them are fake bones. And I've been walking down the street right after Halloween, and I know that I'm going to be picking up skeletons in the trash, and I'm going to have a lot of good bones because they're all over the neighborhood. But really, mostly these are natural. And I've got a very large collection of bones. Actually, they really appeal to me. And so I might be delving back into them. Also fish skeletons. So I started working with them again this summer. So you have little bits of things in the works. I feel it. This was made after Hurricane Katrina. I have a lot of relatives in New Orleans. And after the storm, the Pauper Cemetery, it's in St. Luke's, I think. The bones float to the surface. It was a very moving experience to walk through, and one walks through cemeteries in New Orleans because it's a very moving experience. And they were human bones, there were bones and chickens walking around New Orleans. So it was, this was in relationship to that experience. A few more twist tie quilts, and then I'm going to open, so we're getting to the end. This is kind of where I started, when I started scavenging the streets, and I was using the materials. Now I'm finding masks and plastic, plastic gloves, but I sure am not finding the abundance of little plastic vials that I used to find. In fact, I'm rather disappointed that I don't find very much. My neighborhood is very cleaned up. So these are crack vials and little crack bags. I can tell you a lot about the history of addiction in West Philadelphia and the packaging of drugs. These are perfume vials. So the packaging of drugs is adorable and everybody wants it. And this is a little perfume vial, and this is a little children's toy, and they all look alike, and they're probably all made by the same manufacturer. This is some art objects I found around my house. And again, there's just nothing here. I walk out and I am not inspired. This is a bullet I found in my yard one morning. Someone must have just shot into the air, but there's nothing like this anymore. I say with disappointment, I say, you know, we'll just, it's open, it's another discussion. And again, street finds. And this is how I would, this is my start of textiles, handwork, and documenting people's lives and the current economy. That's
Thank
it.
you so much, Amy. That was wonderful. I'd love to open it up for questions now. If anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can type it into the chat.
Amy, I have a question. I live in West Philly, and Gary actually does too. And I feel like I see the totem poles of art on like a lot of street corners all over. And I'm so happy to know that it's you, and to have heard the backstory. Are you the only person who does them in West Philadelphia, or do you know if like other artists also make them?
Well, certainly there's a big practice of street art, but you know, and I don't work with yarn. So one way you can identify my work is I want when it gets wet for it to, I don't want it to be soggy.
Yeah.
But there are many people out there working with yarn. In fact, one person who's on right now and who really inspired me to like put my work on the street is Catherine Pennepacker, who is online, and she is so wonderful too. But really, you know, just like taking charge and taking ownership in the city and taking part. And that is something that she certainly was doing before me.
I love it. Thank you for the backstory. I'm really excited to look for them now.
Great, there will be more because I think West Philly needs it. We need it. We need a little cheering up. Yeah.
Well, that was actually going to be my question. I was going to ask you what inspired you to take your work to the streets.
It was a project I was doing to empty my studio, you know, and I say that with, you know, and it wasn't just factual, it was an emotional experience. I've been bringing things in forever. You know, I'm hauling things in every time I go out for a walk, which is a lot because I have a little dog who is my excuse for taking walks. And I wanted to just get it out. I wanted to get it out. And also working alone in a studio, I was very alone in a studio. And I've been exploring, always been like, what place does my work play in the public sector? That's really confusing as a textile artist, as a fiber artist, to figure out how your work could fit into like, you know, the mural arts context, or because it's more immediate and it doesn't necessarily, yeah, there are all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
So yes, part of that exploration.
And then your career path seems to have had many different stops. Can you kind of talk about, you know, where you started and how you got to where you are today?
Wow, yeah. So I started really in education. I mean, I always knew that seemed like what you needed to do to be an artist. And I went to Lee School, for those of you in West Philly. I graduated from Lee. It wasn't good, but I did. And I went on to Girls High, art major. And then the funniest thing is, I was the first person to leave this neighborhood. I got out of here. I went to college in Israel. I had been going for a few summers. I had been there with my family. Israel is a whole other discussion that I can't even get into, but even if I say it, I have so much to say. But it was a fantastic experience. I went to an amazing art school in Jerusalem, got a great education in fine arts. So my background is in fine arts. And then I came back to the United States after that. And, you know, I was back in Philadelphia. You know, what are you doing? You come home from Europe, you come home. And I very quickly started working, and I went on to get an MA at University of the Arts. And then I put together a book. I was very, very shy, actually. So this is my story. It might not be the story that other people tell, but I was very shy. And also I'd come back from Israel, where I had been living in a communal context, you know, not that they function like this, but I really had the belief that together we can make things a lot different. if we do things together. So my graduate thesis project out of UArts was the Artist's Guide to Philadelphia, which nobody knows about now, but from so for 10 years, I guess 10 years, every year I put together a book on all the exhibition spaces in Philadelphia and then greater Philadelphia. It kept growing. It was funded by Pennsylvania Council on the Arts continually. And it didn't cost very much money. And I did post office box. And it was I went to my post office box, got orders every night. And it was very pre-computer. I never quite made it onto the computer, even though I paired within Liquid to get it going once we all went digitally. And I was really burning out. We just never kind of made the next step. But in doing that, I met everybody in the city. I met every gallery. I went in the art museum, anyone who was exhibiting or looking at contemporary art in any context, I had a relationship with, because I was collecting their information for artists and everything. They didn't have insurance when I started. And then they began to see the information in print, and they really, people had to up their game. So anyway, Artist's Guide, that went in for years. That got me jobs. I worked at Bucks County Community College as art museum director, one of the most fun jobs in the world. And I learned so much, and then settled into a teaching career at Rosemont College. And while I was at Rosemont, Rosemont has a great art department, a BFA program for a small college. It's really good. I had great colleagues, and I always had other projects going on. And so at a certain point at Rosemont, again, this is the subject of a whole other conversation, a lot of wine. I actually left a tenured teaching job. Because I had other projects going on, and I couldn't really do all of it. And a private college wasn't paying me that much, and I could get some grants. And I really took a leap and left that position, and went on to develop a project called, or to build Fiber Philadelphia 2020. Again, a big collective project that brought fiber arts, because I think fiber arts are like the center of everything. And there was a moment when it was, and we're going to bring it back. But anyway, I've worked on these wonderful group projects or collaborative projects with many groups. I really enjoy doing that very much. I hope we're talking about reviving it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Amy. This has been a really wonderful presentation. We did have one question. Do you take donations of materials? Do you want donations?
I do want donations. And then I don't get 1 million donations. When I solicit, I get 1 million. But if you have stuff you think I want, yes, I probably do. And I'll decide once you give it to me yes.
All right. Thank you so much. I love your vibrant and colorful artwork. It's been very inspiring tonight. So thank you for being here and sharing with us. And thank you everyone for coming.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.